2 weeks ago in the co-main event of UFC Fight Night, Sandhagen versus Song, we were supposed to be getting Giga Chikadze and Sodiq Yusuff. Chikadze out, and Sodiq Yusuff is just left. Doesn't have a fight.
What a fight that would have been, though.
It would have been great. And then ultimately, we get two division champ out of Cage Titans and FAC. Shameless Don Shainis. Matt, do you think he walks into every single room going, I'm Shainis? Shainis is a man can be. Do you think he's a big Garth fan?
I don't think he is. I hope not.
Well, I mean, listen, Garth Brooks, let's get physical on stage. But when it does come to this matchup, for Super Sodiq Yusuff, you know him from Contender Series. He got that big-time win over Mike Davis. He was actually more than a 2-1 underdog in that matchup. Craziest thing that people might not know about Yusuff, he's been a favorite in every single UFC fight that he's had, and he really does have a decent level of competition. It's kind of the build that you like to see the UFC go on. He gets that win over Mike Davis on Contender Series.
He fought his way up in a great way.
And then he fights Suman Mokhtarian, and he's a giant favorite in that one. And then he fights, who else? Shimon Moraes, Gabriel Benitez, Andre Fili, loses to Arnold Allen, beats Alex Caceres. It really was a nice burn for Yusuff out of Lloyd Irvin Martial Arts. And for Yusuff, the one knock on him in his UFC career is that he can get knocked in the first round. You look at the Gabriel Benitez fight, you look at the fight against Arnold Allen, he's had to rally. He's shown that he can rally, but he's had to rally in those fights.
Exactly, I couldn't agree more. That's the thing about Sodiq Yusuff. You look at him and you see the power punching that he's able to display, you see the physicality to his game, and you assume that there isn't much of a lasting ability because of it. You couldn't be more wrong, though, and that is the thing about Yusuff. He can get off to a slower start. He almost fights in that Forrest Griffin kind of way, where the fight doesn't start until he gets cracked, and then the fight begins at that point, because Yusuff he can carry his power very late. He has an odd wrestling game, because let's be honest, he doesn't necessarily have a wrestling base like a Michael Chandler or Josh Emmett or even an Alex Munoz, for instance, but he isn't the worst MMA wrestler. Like, he can go out and get his own offensive takedown. He was able to do it against Andre Fili in their matchup, and I think we all understand that, okay, Fili might not be the greatest wrestler of all time or grappler, but if you can go out there and have success in that department against a guy like Fili, when we think of you as a striker, it's just a really nice thing to have in your game and in your back pocket to be able to go to when things get dicey on the feet. But the thing about Sodiq Yusuff is he has so much power and really good technique that things rarely do get dicey for him on the feet. But like you said, the people who have been able to have success with him are sort of the longer, rangier strikers in this division. The Gabriel Benitez fight was a really important one for Sodiq Yusuff. Benitez at that point was still thought of as maybe not a ranked fighter by any means, but just one of those dangerous, unranked guys who give anybody a tough fight. Just a classic I can play spoiler type of a fighter. And Gabriel Benitez made Sodiq come to him. He didn't initiate a lot of the exchanges, and when Yusuff did drop his hands to try to throw one of those big hooks, Benitez was able to catch him on that half beat, put him down, but from that point forward, Sodiq Yusuff kept his hands up, and that was really the key. Yusuff does seem to be one of those fighters who, if he makes a mistake early, he will learn from some of those previous mistakes, and he can build as the fight progresses.
Well, I mean, on the dicey counter, we've got dicey, but you talk about his wrestling, and he did actually struggle in the wrestling department. You brought it up. He took Andre Fili down. Andre Fili took him down 3 times.
Fili took down Dennis Bermudez, though.
Caceres took down Yusuff. Arnold Allen took Yusuff down a couple of times. So he has been susceptible to getting taken down. And again, we mentioned it. He has been a favorite in his UFC fights. Minus 600 against Mokhtarian, 145, 280, minus 145, minus 135 against Allen, and minus 270 against Alex Caceres' last time out. But if you do consider it, he's actually technically 10th all time in featherweight history in significant strike differential.
Really?
At a 1.43 clip. It's 5.22 to 6.36.
Still high numbers.
Really high output. He gets hit more than the UFC average, but it is what it is. So let's focus in on the man who is billed out of Boston, Massachusetts, trains out of Citadel Martial Arts and Fitness, but for this camp, switching it up, Glory MMA and Fitness. I think you saw James Krause in his corner, not so far away. He was on Dana White's Looking for a Fight, was the guy who, I mean, when I look at Don Shainis, all I think of is, but I've never been in love like this! Oh, it's out of my hands! I'm Shainis!
I'm so sorry if you have headphones on right now.
Do you think he goes to, like, the stadium shows? Do you think he traveled to Ireland to go see Garth Brooks?
I hope not.
Hashtag Mr.
Because if he's
Yearwood.
that big of a fan, then it's gonna make me want to see him lose.
I tell people, like, we laugh, we joke. I just sang Garth Brooks twice.
Garth Brooks so much.
I am not a Garth Brooks fan at all. And when I tell people that I like country music and I don't like Garth Brooks, they lose their minds. They don't understand. But for Don Shainis, when you go back and you watch his tape, boy, is it ever fun.
That's the thing. A guy making his UFC debut who fights in the style of Don Shainis is either going to have the best chance to win or the worst chance to win. And when we did the initial preview of the card and the show opening, I had mentioned that this fight does kind of remind me of Josh Emmett when he'd taken on Ricardo Lamas. And no, Josh Emmett wasn't making his UFC debut in that fight, but he was making his divisional debut at 145 pounds, and nobody thought Josh Emmett had a snowball's chance in hell to win that fight. But what was he able to do? He went in there, threw some hammers, and one of those was able to land against Ricardo Lamas, a guy who traditionally has been a bit of a slow starter in the past. So for Don Shainis, who does throw with everything behind his shots, we'll throw it in combinations. We'll throw some up the middle attacks too, some of those things that we have seen Yusuff struggle with in the past. I could see this being a fight where Shainis is able to go in there, get that 40-second stoppage, a la Alexander Hernandez. Benil Dariush is another one that comes to mind. These have happened before in the past.
You look at these two guys, and physically, they're very much the same. Sodiq Yusuff, smaller featherweight in terms of his height. Don Shainis, same thing. Both guys yoked up. Both guys have some of the biggest legs you're ever going to see in this division. And for both of them, it helps them throw their power shots. They can plant and throw. And when you look at Don Shainis, 5-0-1 as an amateur. His lone draw was his last amateur fight against Chris Mutino, who's in the UFC. 12-3 as a pro. And you look at it, he's on a 5-fight win streak. He's finished plenty. I threw the tweet out there, and I'll throw it up there on screen. I thought it was a layup. Chris Lencioni was going to beat him on looking for a fight, and Chris Lencioni was going to end up on Contender Series or the UFC. That was a really weird fight because Chris Lencioni looked like he showed up to win, but he didn't show up till the third round to win that fight. First round, he looked like he was playing touch. He did not
started very late.
He didn't look comfortable. It was a weird showing from Lencioni. So you look at it for Shainis, not a good level of competition, but that's the weird thing. So we
all know who he beat.
Just look at this 5-fight win streak. He beats 3-3 Quentin Weiland. This is in the end of 2021. On short notice, he fights Chris Lencioni and he beats him.
Sorry, can I pretend to be the CEO for Cage Titans 52 next?
Oh, so you're...
Hey, Don, do you want to win?
Hold on. So you're Calvin Cater?
Yeah, can I be Calvin Cater for a moment? Hey, Don, you know Jay Ellis? He's 16 and 103. Do you want to fight him?
At the time.
104 after that fight.
So if anybody's never seen a Jay Ellis fight, I've been in the room for one of them when he took on Josh Harvey.
It's like seeing a unicorn.
Oh, well, there's so many of them. There's a lot of unicorns then. But the craziest part about it is, so again, 3-3 Quentin Weiland, then he beat 7-2 Chris Lencioni. That holds a ton of water. And he beat him round 1, round 2. They gave 30-27s were out there, but I thought Lencioni won the third round. He looked pretty good in that round. Jay Ellis does his typical Jay Ellis thing. Runs out to the cage, runs across the cage, big burst, and then he gets finished really easily. So that's a predictable win. Now, Jay Ellis went 1-1 against Gerald Meerschaert, so there is that. Then, Don Shainis takes on Cody Pfister. Well, Cody Pfister fought 4 times in the UFC and fought on The Ultimate Fighter. Hadn't fought in over a year. Shainis does his typical, and if you've never seen Don Shainis fight, here it is. This guy goes balls to the wall and brawls for as long as the fight goes on. And he'll get a takedown, and he's very much submission, ground and pound over position. He will jump to submissions that aren't even there.
Kind of undisciplined.
Just to see if he can get them. But Don Shainis is very much, if you were 17 and you just found out what a king-size Red Bull was, that's how Don Shainis fights. It's all over the place, and it doesn't make any sense. He beats Cody Pfister because he goes balls to the wall, finishes him on the mat. Then he fights 9-7 Bryce Pico. So you go from fighting Cody Pfister and winning a title at lightweight to then fighting Bryce Pico with Cage Titans for the featherweight strap. 9-7 Bryce Pico. The fight starts off, I'm gonna brawl, and then Bryce Pico goes, I'm gonna land a straight shot, and it completely wobbles Don Shainis. Don turns into a wrestler, then he ends up finishing Bryce Pico. But it is a fan-friendly style. I don't know if it's conducive to good cardio and winning in the UFC, but it's a hell of a lot of fun to watch.
I thought Sodiq Yusuff had a really good chance to beat Giga Chikadze. I'm not going to lie. I know Giga looked really good all the way up until he fought Calvin Kattar, but I thought that was just a good stylistic matchup for Sodiq Yusuff. I don't think Sodiq Yusuff's going to lose to Don Shainis if I thought he had a chance to beat Giga Chikadze. I'm sorry.
The odds in this one, Yusuff open minus 550, minus 967 for Shainis. That's too rich for my blood. Shainis open plus 420. and now plus 606.
Again.
We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. I doubt they're close. I'm going to say over under 95%.
I'll say over. And here's the last thing, too. Sodiq is the younger fighter between these two. Like, he is a young fighter for where he is in the UFC. Damn it.
622 total votes, 94% Yusuff, 30% by decision, 64% by knockout for the 6% that have Shainis, 62% by knockout. Matt, you and me going fishing in the dark was a cover that Garth did from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. Shainis has a good opportunity early in the fight because I don't like how Sodiq gets knocked and has to find his way into some of these fights. So if you like Don Shainis and you like him by knockout, you probably like him in the first round. I like Yusuff to win, but the odds are just silly.
The odds are, okay. I agree with the odds. They're just ridiculous. That's all it is. Like, MMA is a dumb sport where anybody can win at any point just because the gloves are so small and everyone's a knockout artist basically because of it. But Sodiq Yusuff is one of the best fighters in this division. Like, he lost a decision to Arnold Allen, who just knocked out Dan Hooker in like 2 minutes. So I do think Sodiq Yusuff is very belonging in these rankings. I think he's going to be in the top 15 for a very long time. And I think he's a tough matchup for a lot of fighters in these rankings. So other than an Alexander Hernandez, Benil Dariush type of a knockout, I don't see Yusuff losing this.
Both of us going with Super Sodiq Yusuff to get the win. It is the overall wave that Yusuff brings into a fight like this where I can see him getting it done, where Shainis can get a little bit reckless, and maybe they should change that nickname from Reckless, Shameless. We'll see what happens. Matt, big time fights on this card. If you missed it, Mike Davis taking on Slava Borshev in the co-main event. Randy Brown taking on Francisco Trinaldo in the main event. Mackenzie Dern, Xiaonan. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.